Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Talking Business with Chad and Mike. You've noticed that the title's a little different. We've changed to better reflect what we're doing here in the show, what we've been doing pretty much for 20 episodes now. And we'll have a little bit more information on that in the future that Mike and I will be sharing as well. Our guest today is Ken Coe. He is the founder of Statera, and he's going to share more about that as we get into the discussion. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other since grad school at Northwestern. He also has experience as a chief financial officer and also as an entrepreneur with several business adventures that I'm sure we'll dig into that as well. And we'll talk about, who knows, about the entrepreneurship, communication, business in general, lessons learned, things going well, maybe things that could have gone better. But Mike, I think you have something to get us warmed up with today.
So hello, everyone, and I'll re-echo what Chad said. So this is welcome to Talking Business with Chad and Mike. It's we've grown up. This is our 21st episode, and we have grown up. Now we can drink, right, Chad?
That's right. The hard stuff.
It is indeed. Nice to meet you, Ken. And so a little bit of an icebreaker just to get things going. What kind of fruit? What's your favorite fruit and why? How about that? Did you expect that question? I don't think so.
I did not. Favorite food would have to be anything Italian.
Oh, no, fruit.
Fruit. No, fruit.
Fruit.
Well, by the way, I love Italian food too. And if I was asked that question about food, I'd probably say Italian. But actually, it's fruit.
Fruit. Blueberries. I probably consume 100 blueberries a day, one way or another.
Cool. How has that always been like a favorite of yours?
No. As a child, it was always bananas, but for some reason, as an adult, I just got hooked on blueberries. I'm a man of routine, and so every morning it's oatmeal and blueberries.
Okay. I love blueberries. Give me strawberries, give me raspberries, give me blackberries. I'm a berry guy. I am a berry guy. Yeah. Well, now that we've cleared that up, that he loves blueberries, I can go with that. Chad, can you go with blueberries as well?
I do eat blueberries almost every morning in my little berry cup, but for favorite fruit for me is actually watermelon. I've always loved watermelon. It's just something I could sit there and knock out an entire watermelon all by myself. And for some reason, the ones with seeds taste better.
Well, we better be careful because we could turn this whole conversation into fruits. Because yes, but let's move on. Let's get a little more serious, Chad. Ask him some questions.
Oh, so what's your fruit?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I love fruit of all kind, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, and we were up in what we called a bungalow colony, which was up in the Catskills, where we'd have sort of like I don't know, think of it as a cabin, and there were any number of cabins, and it was very basic. And every week, the fruit truck man came on, and he had this flatbed truck and sort of like pyramid, and he had every kind of fruit you could imagine. And in those days, fruit was always seasonal. Like you wouldn't find watermelon in the winter, you wouldn't find blueberries in the winter. But he had every kind of fruit imaginable, and he happened to like my grandmother so much so that I could choose any fruit that I wanted to eat. So give me apricots, give me plums, give me peaches, give me any kind of fruit, and I'm there. So now you should be sorry you asked me, but let's go on.
Okay. So, and on that note, so Ken, one of the things we've talked about, recently and stuff has been a new venture that you've launched, and Statera, which you were telling me is Latin for balance. And I know one of the things that you're really passionate about is, employee engagement and how employees, are, treated, how they, what their conditions are, how they perform and stuff like that. So, kind of give us a general overview of, what it is that you want to do with Statera and how'd you get there?
So over the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, I've been all finance. I've been, a quantitative thinker. I've been focusing on Excel spreadsheets and, balance sheets and budgets and all that fun stuff. But as I got older and more, I climbed the corporate ladder, I started to, I guess, kind of have feelings, that qualitative information started to kick in. And so, as I got into the CFO role in those higher finance positions, I started noticing that I actually cared a lot more about the qualitative more than the quantitative. And not that I didn't care about the quantitative, but, I saw the impact that my decisions had, not just on the company, but on the employees. And once COVID hit, there were some really hard discussions, really hard decisions that needed to be made. And so, we saw people go to the completely hybrid model or the complete work from home model. And I just decided, hey, look, if I want to champion what I care about most, I need to go out on my own. And so I launched Statera because, again, I wanted to add balance, and add balance from a sense of not just caring about the company's bottom line, but, employees that are engaged, or companies that have employees that are engaged, see upwards of 21% increase in their revenue. I know I've been at companies where the culture hasn't been that good, and I've been at companies, I'll give an example, Hollister Incorporated up in Libertyville. I'll give them a special shout out. They had a culture that was second to none. I was more engaged. I was happy to go to work. Not many people can say that, but, if I'm going to be working for, a 9 to 5, I was really, really excited at the end of the day. Hey, tomorrow I can't wait to finish this project, to see my peers. And it was about the culture, the culture. I was being engaged by my peers, by my superiors. And so, like I said, I just wanted to branch out on my own and, wanted to champion making sure that employees, got, not, obviously every employee is compensated, but are you emotionally compensated? And that's what I wanted to focus on.
Well, now this isn't also your first venture into entrepreneurship as well, correct?
Correct. Correct.
So is this something that you've kind of gone, I know you've done like the employee thing, you've done the entrepreneurship thing. Where do you find yourself, most comfortable or, most driven, as far as different work styles or work arrangements?
Well, not that I'm the controlling type, but I do enjoy being an entrepreneur because I'm controlling my own destiny. And I get to set the tone and set the culture the way that I would like the culture to be. Nothing wrong with the 9 to 5. I actually thoroughly enjoyed my years, in finance. But as I got older, I started to realize, I'm more partial to how my employees are feeling than the kind of the grit and the grind of, just focusing on the bottom line.
So, Mike, we hear a lot about, culture and how that's kind of, it fades in and out as a buzzword, but then, it has ramifications. How have you seen this over, like, even just since COVID or post-COVID, and some of your clients that you've been working with there in New York, and consulting them in different situations?
Well, so, interestingly enough, it's not been very difficult to transition from being in person to remote because of technology. So from the technology perspective, it's been relatively easy. We adapted to Zoom almost like that. And because of COVID, at least for that first year, pretty much it had to be remote, right? But then we realized that things got better with COVID, and so we could come back to some level of being face to face. Everybody got used to the remote, and a lot of pushback on employees who said, why do I have to spend 3 hours commuting every day when I can get my work done? We could work remotely. But the ability to create a company culture, to incorporate the values, the core values, becomes, I think, very difficult remotely. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I do find, now I have a client that started in 2013 and they've always been remote. So creating a remote culture was not very difficult for them because they had been doing this for the last 10 years.
Mhm.
But I've had a number of other clients where it is difficult. I know for myself, when I ran my own company in another century, admittedly, everybody had to be at work all the time. In fact, you'd come early and you'd stay late, but if you left sort of at 5 or 6, somebody would turn around and say, where you going? Half a day? So everybody was in the office. That was the culture. And now it becomes even more problematic because in one company, you're going to have 4 different generations, right? You're going to have boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, and I don't know, there's one more, which I forget, but literally 4 or 5 different generations. And how do you assimilate a culture remotely with 4 or 5 different generations? So I think it's a tremendous struggle these days. It's not just, it's not just commuting. I think it's very difficult, but people manage, obviously.
So what's your take on the multi-generational or increased generational, I guess, workplaces that we're seeing today that maybe it was 2 or 3 generations previously? Ken.
Are you
I'm sorry, that was for Ken.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point and a good question. So, and that's kind of one of the other reasons why we started Statera, because, for me, I've had some, situations where I'll give you a quick story. I'm approaching a young lady in our little cafeteria area, and I just said, hey, good morning. And she was mortified. She didn't know what to say. And I'm like, you okay? And she's like, wait, are you talking to me? I'm like, yes, of course. Good morning, And she's just like, I'm sorry, you're the CFO. I didn't know you would talk to me. And that kind of stood out. And so, me, of course, the average, CFO is I want to say 54.6 years of age. I'm quite a bit beneath that. And so, I've actually had my, issues with, certain positions and hiring managers saying, hey, thinking, how old are you again? Or questioning, certain things that are pertinent to my age. I think that while it is a challenge to kind of bridge those gaps between generations, I'm a firm believer in, finding those, someone's likeness or someone's, some of the things that connect us more so than disconnect us. And, my bosses have always been, the CEO, or, someone who's been in their career 25 plus years. And there's a huge age gap, but one of the things that I actually helped implement at one of my companies was, just breakfast with the CEO. And so that the kind of the frontline workers that were in their late teens, early 20s, the middle managers that are in their 30s and 40s, had an opportunity to hear from upper management and kind of understand, hey, we're all the same. We all have to put our clothes on. We all have the same commute. We all, maybe we like the Bears, maybe we like the Packers, maybe we like the Giants, maybe we like the Jets. And so I think that I found it very interesting. So much so that, again, that's part of our mission, is to bridge the gap between, the generations, because while it's difficult, I don't think it's insurmountable at all.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's not, but I would think that part of that solution of sort of closing the gap between different generations is basically giving up generalizations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We generalize about boomers, we generalize about Gen X, we generalize about millennials, we generalize about every one of those groups. And I think the task in getting, a culture is to give up the generalizations and see people as individuals who make up a group, but not necessarily, sort of like just a generalization. I think that's really key to creating a culture, giving it up.
Spot on. I mean, and that's something actually me and Chad learned quite a bit about in our cohort. Those implicit biases that we all have, right? Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of it myself. I go into my favorite restaurant, and maybe a summer worker is there, and I'm like, this kid is 16. Like, please make sure that my order's right. And I have to catch myself, like, nope, he's capable, she's capable. No matter the age. So you're spot on. Those generalizations can get us in trouble. And those are the things that, those are the difficult conversations to have. However, I think we're at a point where, they're necessary. And, we've had, with some of our clients, those are conversations that they've been willing to have and have really, they've welcomed them.
It's interesting, Ken. I think one of the biggest issues that I have found with the companies that I work with, when they talk about merging the different groups, in other words, the Gen Zs and et cetera, is work ethic. How do you deal with? Because it's like, look, we're men of certain age, so we've learned through our own experiences about work ethic. And I'm sure we have some very strong work ethics here. But how does Statera, which is looking for balance and looking to, to make things work, how do you deal with the issue of work ethics and the difference of how different groups have different approaches to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that, I've managed many finance teams. You have, the accountant that's been there for 30 years, and then you have the intern that just graduated. I'm a firm believer in really understanding the individual. I think too often the manager thinks that the staff accountant who's been there 30 years will have the same work ethic as the 21-year-old who just graduated, when those experiences, those life experiences and work experiences are totally different, right? So if you manage the individual instead of the collective, then I think you better understand, the group that you have. And that's one of the things that we work with, middle managers and directors about is, hey, yes, you have a group of 10, but these are 10 very different individuals. They all have their idiosyncrasies. Take a little bit of time to learn this person, right? If we know that, Sarah likes to leave at 4, okay, let's make sure that, Sarah gets in at a certain time as well. But not only that, Sarah understands exactly what the goal is for the day. Setting goals for Sarah. If she likes to leave early, as long as she's, getting her job done, that's great. And also, like I said, the 30-year-old or 30-year veteran, you have to say, okay, I know that, and this is where change management comes in, right? I know that you've been here, you've done everything the way you needed to do it, but there's going to be some pivots, and helping them understand and empowering them to understand maybe a new ERP system or a new function in Excel, but empowering them to learn that, not just telling them to do it, giving them, hey, let's you and I go through this together. Let me learn it just with you. I feel like the individual attention really helps the collective. That's kind of been my experience.
I think one of the challenges with this that I've seen in a lot of different organizations as well is, what's the expectations that were set though? As far as, okay, it's everybody has their situations, but also what is the outcome that needs to be achieved, and how is that communicated and those expectations set at the same time, so that, you're still ultimately, doing what you need to do. And everybody's still rowing in that same direction, versus, everybody kind of going off and, doing their own thing, where it becomes counterproductive, as well. And one thing I was wondering, Ken, is as you start up this business, what has been different from the other businesses that you started before? Because we've talked, you've done some stuff like in some of the technology spaces, you got some real estate experience and stuff like that. And whether it's industry or time frame, the different age, the different businesses, what's been something that's been different for you this time around? Oh, I'm shooting off fireworks now, apparently.
I think personally, it's actually been passion. My first startup was in the tech space, as you know, Chad. But I was young, did not really understand that you needed money to make money. Did not understand that, your network was, really pivotal to your success. And while, I was just, it was kind of blind ambition in my early 20s. From a real estate standpoint, very passionate about that. But that, that's just making sure you have, decent credit. And so that hasn't been too much of an issue. But then you have, the variables there in real estate as well, such as now, the real estate market is astronomically high as far as cost. It's very tempting to just go ahead and sell the whole thing, sell the portfolio. But, from that standpoint, it's just kind of waiting and having a long-term plan. And again, I'm glad that I started later in life, where I was mature enough to kind of understand the value of creating an action plan. And I think that's the difference now as well. When I was an entrepreneur in my early 20s, there was blind ambition. There wasn't really a plan in place. There was, okay, we're going to go raise this money. I don't know from where, but, if we have to fly to Silicon Valley and knock on doors, that's what we're going to do. But that's where the plan started and ended. Versus now, I've been able to assemble a team that makes sense for what we're doing. We've been able to really network with great attorneys, great content writers, great marketing specialists, great social media specialists. So I understand the value of, having those resources around me a lot better, now than ever before.
So one thing I don't know if Mike shared with you, it's like he had a tech company, and it was one that you sold, at that, when it got to that point, at that point in his career. And, just one of those things like just bridged by the years, the lessons and the advice that you could have learned from Mike at that point, when he was, doing that type of business. And, just how the things are so different over, how much more we can automate, for example, nowadays compared to how much was person driven back then. And, when we're talking about working with employees, I know one thing that I've run into with a number of my clients right now is the return to office, issue right now.
So to give you an idea of how different it was, I think we were about, we grew to about 75 employees at one time. We were on 3 different floors in Midtown Manhattan, small floors. There were 6,500 square feet each floor plate. And so up until I think we had about 40 employees, I could shake every employee's hand every morning. And so I would get in early. I'd be in at the desk, I don't know, 7:30, and everybody would start coming in about 8:39. And I literally, for the first hour of every morning, I walked around and I shook hands with every employee in the company. And now I don't think you can physically do that anymore. You're not, it's whatever, things have changed. But when I did, I got a chance to look somebody in the eye and say, how are you this morning? How's it going? What's your plan for the day? What's happening? And that was a very personal thing. Now, once we got past 40 employees, it became difficult. I couldn't do everybody in the same day. I could do a group. But, now today, if you're in a remote type of situation, you can't reach across the screen and shake someone's hand. You can't look in their eye that closely. So it's like it's so much more difficult to make that emotional connection. So that was one of the lessons I've learned is, you've got to make an emotional connection with your employee. Like you said that earlier in the conversation when you talked about the young lady who you said good morning to, and she couldn't even fathom why you had actually spoken to her. But I think emotional connections are really important. On the other hand, the balance of that is can't make that much of an emotional connection. Because if you make too much of an emotional connection, then it's not you go across that boundary of professionalism. And that's the other thing. So I'll ask you this, Ken, how do you handle that boundary between emotional and professionalism in today's world?
Honestly, I keep it brief. I keep it very short, and it's not. I'm not being, I'm not being succinct in a rude way. But I do understand that in today's landscape, sometimes lines get blurred, and I say enough and I engage enough, just enough to make that person feel, feel acknowledged. And I make sure that I keep it, to your point, as what you used to do, to say, hey, what do you have going on today? Does your department need anything? I keep it as professional as possible. Every once in a while, depending on my audience, we'll make a quick joke about sports. But I think it is important at any level to maintain the professionalism, just so that people aren't, because there are people that will take advantage, obviously. But then again, there are people that aren't really receptive to getting the daily hello, I've found as well. And so for me, I decided to just kill them with kindness and hey, it's okay. Today will be a great day for you. And I keep going. So I think just being succinct in your conversation, being as professional as possible, that has, that's been helpful.
Okay. Here's a what if for everybody, for both Ken and Mike here. This is a common thing that I'm running into right now, where a younger employee will tell a more, senior person, they don't know what they're talking about. And they be flat out to their face, or that they are not going to come into the office, just not going to do it. What would you advise? Now, this is a very generic, but it's a real world example of things that are happening right now. And there's even articles, in the Wall Street Journal, et cetera, about these things, these, I guess, uprisings, for lack of a better word. What would you advise to a client, Ken? Let's take the RTO example, the return to office example, where people are like, why do I need to come back? Maybe they, have, whatever the reason is, but when they are, blatantly saying like, no, I'm not going to do this in that example or something else, what would you advise, a client to do in that situation, or at least first step?
I think it is understanding the why behind the no, right? So why aren't you coming in? Because when you sign an employment contract, you do have a duty to abide by their rules. Now there's some ambiguity in the return to office theme right now, because we've gone through something that's been unprecedented in history, but nevertheless, understanding the why. So if it's a medical situation, or I've had a situation not too long ago where a young lady had to take care of their ailing mother. Okay, there's an exemption there, obviously. But if it's, hey, I just don't want to, I don't want to be there. I would advise, okay, I need you to explain to your employee the value of being there. Also remind them that they are gainfully employed with your company, and that they have rules. And so I don't want to excuse is not really going to fly. Unfortunately, in my last company, we probably lost, I would say, 40 to 60 employees over the course of a year and a half, just because of, hey, I don't want to come back. And there was no rhyme or reason other than I don't want to. And so, like I said, I just advise to understand, companies, hey, figure out why. If it's really important, flexibility and balance is what we preach. And so, you have to be open to it within reason, because then you also have HR compliance that you have to abide by as well. So you can't be favorable to one and not the other. So it is finding, rules at the HR level as well. Hey, look, if, we will allow exemptions for these 3 or 4 situations, you have to prove that. If not, then the expectation is to be in office.
Yeah. So, I'm old school, a little older than both of you guys, and, started a company in another century. So, things are a little different. But look, here's the thing. Every company needs, so I can answer your question directly, but before that, there are 2 things that have to get established: core values and rules of engagement. You create a company, it's a living entity. Continuously changes, it's not static. But you create it, and the very first thing you're going to do is you create core values and rules of engagement, which becomes a culture. And when you hire people, you're going to look for people who want to be in that culture and want to abide by those core values and by those rules of engagement. And then again, there are lots of people who come in, younger people perhaps, who think that, they know better for whatever reason. Or the older guy thinks that he knows better. And now you have an issue where, sort of like people rubbing against each other and how you deal with it. And somebody says, well, why do I have to do this? Doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to be, how would you say, productive. If I stay home and I do this work, I'll be productive. Don't you want that level of productivity? Or do you just want me to mindlessly come and stay in the office and waste the time, and I give you X hours less of my productivity? Makes sense to some degree, no question. But then again, there are rules of engagement, and there's a culture, and there are core values. And so that's the struggle, is to basically make sure that that's happening. Look, I just been this week, actually, I had one client tell me that they hired a new systems engineer and supposed to be in at 9 o'clock, and the very first day comes in an hour late, very first day of work. Okay, what do? You write him up, so I mean, do you fire him immediately? Do you give him a long leash? I have another client that, I think very similar thing. Had a new young person, and same thing. So I think it's going to be a true test. There is no one answer, but the culture, the core values, the rules of engagement, expectations laid out before you hire, make sure you're hiring the right person. Then, an old guy like me would have just said, in that other century, fire him. Business is not a democracy. And that's really, I think, what people have to understand. It's not a democracy. You do have a right to vote in an organization, but it's not quite the same as being in a democracy, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I believe businesses have certain, I know there are lots of different types of organizations, flat organizations, hierarchical organizations. You just have to figure out what type of organization you're in. Some of the other issues I'm sure you're dealing with are like transparency. How transparent should an organization be?
It's it's one of those, all of those are obviously different topics as far as what are the expectations, what are the rules, going back to the return to office situation. One of the biggest mistakes that organizations made was they gave definitive answers to situations they didn't understand. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to be our new normal. Everybody bug out, go home. That's how we're going to do it from now on. And, they didn't know what from now on was. and they made, a lot of them made these very definitive statements. And as employers, they have that flexibility to be like, you know what, stuff's changed, we're changing this. But it was more of what was the setup, and what did people think that was going to be like moving forward. And that's some of the situations that they find themselves in unwinding now. Is, okay, we said this, yeah, we can like swing the hammer and say that, but then they may be in situations where they're losing key talent at the same time, that goes to another organization that'll work somewhere. And then there's some industries that are more resistant to doing working remotely or a hybrid or something like that than others are. But going forward, it's not going to go away completely. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of factors that impact what a company's going to do as far as work location and style and stuff like that. But so we're going to start wrapping up here in a couple minutes. And one question I would like to go out on here is, where do you, if you're working with a new leader and say they've never been in a leadership position before, what's the first piece of advice that we would give them as a group of experts, that have been around for a while? Whether it says Statera, Mike, it's the voice of reason, coming through, someone that maybe they were a technical person, they did that job very well, and now bing, you're a team lead or you're a department manager, something to that effect. And we put our guests on the hot spot first.
I think it goes back to understanding your why. I've seen many times, especially in IT, a person who's been a developer, they're really good at their job. They've been promoted. Now they're director of IT. Well, now you have 10 developers under you, but that person who's been elevated to the director role or the managerial role always has their head down. They're still doing all the coding. They're still, really entrenched in the day-to-day when they should be managing. And so for me, it's understanding your why. Why did you accept this role? And I've had these conversations before, and oftentimes, well, it's for more money or because I want to move up. Well, that's really the wrong answer to me. The right answer, somebody who wants to take on management of human capital, you need to be invested in your team. You need to be invested in the individuals. You need to be invested in the collective. So my 2 cents, my advice to a newly, crowned or newly appointed manager would be, understand your why and make sure your why has something to do with the people you're managing, or just the qualitative part of management. Because again, if you're just a director and you're just doing the work, you're not really a director. You're just now the highest paid, analyst or developer. So understand the why and make sure that your team is the focal point.
So Mike, what's your spin on this?
Well, first thing, I think I've said this earlier in the conversation. I think someone starting a company and they have an idea, they have some money, however they get it. The first very thing is when you hire your first 2-3 people, you've got to sit down and understand what are the core values. Where are you now? Where do you want to get to? What are some of the steps along the way to get to that end goal? So for instance, a guy starts a business and he says, my core, what's the core value? And I'll tell you how people, I have a very simple approach to how people can grow a company. Because the first thing really is like your why. Ken is appropriate. Why are you doing this? Okay. Then what are the core values? So First few hires have to know exactly your why, embrace your why, and then together create core values. And then together understand where you are now, where you want to get to, and what are the steps along the way to get to that end point. That's the best advice I would give. And I want to draw a picture for you guys. This is how you grow a company. You see this? So what happens is that the people at the very beginning, at the epicenter, are the people who start the company. Now, their job, if they want to grow, is to basically get the people at the next level to basically understand. I'm trying to do this to understand exactly what the core values, and everybody's on the same thing. And then these people at that level, they go out and they do the same thing for the next rung on the ladder. And then those people do the same thing for the people on the next rung of the ladder. That's how you scale a company. That's how you grow. Everybody has the same core values. Everybody understands where they are, where they're going, etc. And everybody understands the why. And that's how it scales. That's my opinion.
Very cool. You just made the inner engineer in me very happy with the drawing. Anything that's graphical drawing makes an engineer happy.
What advice would you give?
I think that it's along with the common theme we seem to all be sharing here. And the terminology approach I use is desired outcome. Is what do you want to have happen? Your core values, driven by your why, etc. And then everybody's rowing in the same direction. And one of the approaches I'll use is like if you look at an organization, kind of like a lattice. So you have the people that are starting it, the founders, the other people that grow out, and everybody's got to be the structure that agrees on what that desired outcome. And I like to use a certain term, desired outcome, because it's what we ideally want to have. Don't always get it, or maybe we get 80% of it, but that we're going towards that goal, and that we're embracing it, like you said. We're supporting it, and it's something that we want to be a part of. And someone that's not supporting that that same outcome, they have a different agenda, they're not probably ideal for that organization. But it's to where basically everybody has their own interest, but ultimately it's supporting that major interest, that primary desired outcome, so that makes an organization successful, and that everybody understands it. And that's where I really work with people on the communication side. It's like, does everybody know what you want to do? And do they agree with it? Do they embrace it? Do they advance it? And when you start having those gaps in organizations, or you have a team go rogue, or you have someone that thinks they're too important, they can do what they want to do without supporting that overall outcome, those are kind of the red flags to watch out for. But the person that's at the epicenter that you were just drawing there, Mike, they understand that it's about growing it out. They understand it's about sharing that why, like Ken said, and they push that out away from them. And that's how, they get stronger. It's that the communication is the lubrication that keeps it all together and keeps running. So I think we're kind of all in a similar theme here. It's maybe a little nuances on how we work with people and our perspective on it.
Well, I would agree with you on that. So here we are. I think we've done more than, I can't tell how many minutes we've done this.
Zoom does not have a timer.
Oh, it doesn't? I think we're pretty down. So Ken, I want to thank you for participating with us. This is, I guess, now one of the things we've learned in our 20 episodes is we say goodbyes we take too many goodbyes. So why don't we do this? You take the last, well, if I say you take the last word and you take the last word and I take the last word, we've had 3 last words. So maybe we'd have only 1 last word. Ken, we're going to give you the last word, and then we'll say goodbye.
Hey, well, it's been great being on you guys' show. I've actually learned a bit, as I always do when I connect with Chad. But Michael, it's really been beneficial for me, just kind of these open-ended questions have really been helpful. I'm sure the audience will agree as well. Website, shameless plug here, statera.com. We've had some pretty big, customers and clients, and looking to add more. But more, obviously more important, anybody who's watching this, listening, really, really take it in. Communication is extremely valuable. And I think it's something that's kind of overlooked from top to bottom in organizations. And you always need a voice of reason. You always need a Chad Eves to help you out. And I'm looking forward to obviously continuing to connect with you both. But more importantly, glad the word is being spread. So thank you both.
And we will include that contact information in the show notes as well, so people can find it there. I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to step on you there.
Not at all. We'll, as Chad said, so I'll just say thank you, Ken, and I hope our audience enjoyed it. So that's the last word for me.
All right. Everybody have a good weekend. And with that, we are done.